It's just a reunion, he said, just like it was nothing. Like it wasn't the first time in 15 years our entire family would gather under one roof, the same roof where I was told to leave and never come back. I found out about this party from a stranger. A distant cousin messaged me on Facebook. "You coming Saturday? Everyone's talking about it. Heard your dad's giving a big speech." I stared at the message for a long time. There was no invitation in my mailbox. No call. No text. Nothing. Just silence, the same kind that had followed me ever since Mom died. When I called him, his tone was casual. "It's just a reunion. Son, don't overthink it. Everyone's invited but me," I said. "You live far. It's complicated." "You know what's complicated," I said softly, "watching the family that disowned you celebrate the life you helped build." He sighed that same tired, self-righteous sigh that always meant end of conversation. "Don't make a scene, Evan!" "You already did," I whispered. That night, I found the old family photo album, page after page of smiles I wasn't part of anymore. My chair at the table, always empty in memory. My name, erased from every story he told. But there was one picture he couldn't erase, the one of me and Mom in the backyard, her arms around me, the sunlight cutting through her hair, her handwriting on the back. "Never let them rewrite you." The reunion was 3 days away. The same house, the same people, the same history I was never meant to walk back into. But this time, I wasn't going to crash their party. I was going to reclaim my place in it. "It's just a reunion," he said. But he was wrong. It was a reckoning. When I was a kid, my father used to tell people I was quiet like his wife. He never meant it as a compliment. My mother was soft-spoken, thoughtful, the kind of person who made space for everyone else in the room, even when there wasn't enough for herself. She loved poetry, old music, and taking pictures of sunsets no one else bothered to notice. He loved control, and the older I got, the more I realized I was built too much like her. Growing up in our house was like living in a museum curated by my father. Every picture on the wall, every story told at dinner, every joke shared with his friends, all had to fit his version of who we were. He was a lawyer, respected, articulate, the kind of man who measured love in obedience. If you disagreed, you were ungrateful. If you questioned him, you were dramatic. And when my mother died, he rewrote even that story too. I was 16, she'd been sick for months, cancer, quiet and cruel. The night she passed, he told me, "She was proud of you, Evan. She'd want you to focus on your future, not your feelings." Then, the next morning, he donated all her things. No conversation, no permission, her books, her photographs, even her wedding ring. I remember standing in the driveway, watching strangers load boxes into a van and thinking I just watched my mother die twice. After that, we stopped talking. Not in anger and habit. The house became a courtroom, and every dinner was cross-examination. He'd ask about grades, internships, appearances, never about grief, never about dreams. When I told him I wanted to study literature, he looked disgusted. "You're smarter than that." "Mom wanted me to write," I said. "And look where that got her," he replied. That was the first time I realized love could sound like violence if you said it wrong. He remarried 3 years later. Her name was Carol Elegant, organized, obsessed with image. She came with 2 kids of her own, Thomas and Abby. And just like that, our home became a catalog photo again. Perfect smiles, planned vacations, rehearsed laughter. The only thing missing was authenticity. I was 19, back from college on break, standing in the kitchen when Carol said, "Oh, Evan, we're doing family photos this weekend. I picked matching outfits." I smiled politely. "Do you need me in it?" She blinked, confused. Of course, your family. But when the pictures came back from the studio, I wasn't in them. Neither was my mother's photo on the wall anymore. At first, I thought it was oversight. Then I found the new family portrait in the living room framed, polished, complete. Dad, Carol, Thomas, and Abby. I asked him about it. It was a last-minute change, he said. You weren't available. I was upstairs, I said quietly. He shrugged. Don't take it personally. It's just a photo. But it wasn't. It was proof. That was the day I stopped trying to fit into a picture that didn't want me in it. I moved out a year later, got a small apartment, started teaching creative writing, and sent fewer and fewer messages home. He didn't complain. He liked distance it made erasing easier. Still, I called on birthdays. I sent cards on holidays. I kept trying to hold on to some kind of thread even when it burned. Every time, he'd answer with the same tone, polite, detached, efficient. I'm glad you're doing well. Yes, everyone's fine. You should visit sometime. But I never did. Because sometime in his language meant when you've earned the right to exist again. Years passed. I published my first book, a small collection of essays about grief, memory, and what it means to outgrow the people who raised you. It wasn't a bestseller, but it was honest, raw, real. One night, I got a text from an old family friend, Mrs. Lawson. Just finished your book. I cried. Your mom would have been proud. Then, a second message. Your father's not happy. Says you made him look heartless. I didn't respond, because maybe I did, and maybe he was. A few months later, he called me out of nowhere. You could have at least changed the names, he said. You could have at least told the truth, I replied. Silence. Then that sigh again. You'll understand when you're a father. No, I said. I'll understand when I'm a son who is loved properly. He hung up. That was the last time we spoke, until the reunion. I didn't hear from anyone in the family for nearly 5 years. Not a text, not a call, not even a forwarded holiday email. And then one day, an old classmate sent me a video from a Facebook post. Dad on stage at some banquet, surrounded by familiar faces. After all these years, he said proudly, it feels good to have my whole family back together again. Applause, laughter, even a slideshow behind him, photos, moments, smiles. But not one frame of me. I closed the video and sat there for a long time, the silence pressing into my chest. Then I whispered the same thing my mom used to say when the world disappointed her. Some stories write themselves. The trick is knowing when to stop reading. I thought I had stopped, but that video, that reunion, pulled me back into a chapter I thought I'd burned. And maybe this time, I wasn't coming back to fit in. I was coming back to finish it. The invitation didn't come from him. It came from Carol. She called on a Tuesday morning, the kind of gray, quiet morning that already feels like bad news. Evan, honey, she began, her voice syrupy sweet. I know things have been distant, but your father would really like it if you stopped by, just for a bit. Stop by, I said, for the reunion I wasn't invited to. She hesitated. You must have gotten lost in the group email. Technology can be so selective, I finished for her. She laughed nervously. We'd just love to see you. I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no either. That night, I packed a small duffel bag. No suit, no expectations, just clothes simple enough to walk away in again, if I had to. As I zipped the bag, I caught my reflection in the mirror, older, steadier, sharper. The boy who once begged to be invited was gone. The man replacing him wasn't coming to belong. He was coming to bear witness. The drive back took 3 hours. The road wound through small towns and quiet fields, each mile peeling away another layer of calm I'd spent years building. By the time I saw the old neighborhood sign, I felt that strange duality nostalgia wrestling with nausea. The house looked exactly the same, 2 stories, white paint, too many windows, too much silence. Even the oak tree by the mailbox still leaned slightly, like it remembered all the secrets it had overheard. The driveway was full cars lined up like trophies. When I stepped out, laughter spilled from the backyard, clinking glasses, familiar voices, the hum of a rented speaker playing 80s hits. No one noticed me at first, and that, somehow, felt perfect. I walked around to the back. It was surreal faces, aged but unchanged in spirit. Uncles, cousins, neighbors all orbiting around my father, who stood near the grill like the sun they all revolved around. He was laughing that booming, commanding laugh that used to fill every room and drain the oxygen from it, even from a distance. I could tell he hadn't changed. Then Carol saw me. Her eyes widened, then softened into that practiced smile. "Evan, you made it," she said too loudly. Heads turned. The noise died a little. My father's expression froze just for a second before he composed himself. "Well," he said, "look who decided to show up." "Guess my GPS finally worked," I said. A few people chuckled. Most didn't. He walked over, his smile tight, public. "You look, well." "So do you," I said. "Retirement suits you." "It's not retirement," he corrected quickly, just stepping back, letting Thomas handle the firm more these days. Thomas, his stepson, the one he always called his pride. "Good for him," I said. The air between us was polite, poisonous. Someone clinked a glass. Speech time. Everyone gathered near the patio as Dad stepped up onto the small stage area, a rented platform, complete with floral backdrop and a mic, of course. He started talking about legacy, unity, family resilience. He thanked Carol, praised Thomas and Abby, nodded at distant relatives. He didn't mention me, not once. I stood in the back, near the hedge, hands in my pockets, letting the words hit like slow raindrops. "We've been through ups and downs," he said, "but at the end of the day, family is about showing up." A few people clapped. I smiled small, sharp. Because he was right, and this time I had. When the applause faded, he stepped down, greeted guests, posed for photos. I stayed in the background, invisible as ever, until one of my cousins, Michael, spotted me. "Holy crap, Evan, dude, it's been forever." We hugged. He whispered quietly, "Man, I didn't even know you were invited." "Neither did I said. He gave me a sad grin. "Some things never change, huh?" "Some things do," I replied. "Just not enough." Dinner was buffet style. People laughed, reminisced, drank too much wine. I sat at the edge of a table, alone, but observant. Carol floated around like a hostess on autopilot, smiling too hard. Thomas kept bragging about his new promotion, and Dad performed. That's what it always was with him, a performance. And tonight, his audience adored him. Halfway through dessert, he raised a glass. "To family," he announced. Everyone echoed. "To family." I stayed quiet, because I'd learned that not all toasts are meant for everyone holding a glass. Then came the slideshow. Of course, there was a slideshow. Photos from the past birthdays, holidays, milestones. Every frame a curated history. And then it hit me, I wasn't in any of them. Not one. Even the old pictures from before Mom died, cropped, edited, reframed. It was as if I'd never existed. The room clapped and cheered as memories flashed by, but my hands didn't move. My father glanced at me once, saw that I'd noticed, and quickly looked away. That was his mistake, because now everyone else noticed him. Michael leaned towards me, whispering, "Did they remove you?" I smiled thinly. "They've been practicing for years." After the slideshow, people started mingling again. I stood up, walked toward the back porch, and took out my phone. I had a photo of Mom, the same one from years ago, the one with her handwriting. I looked at it, then looked back at the crowd inside, all pretending to be something they weren't. And I decided I wouldn't leave quietly this time. I walked back in, calm as ever. Carol froze when she saw me holding my phone. "Everything okay?" she asked, her voice too bright. "Perfect," I said. "Just wanted to share a memory." I walked to the mic stand. The chatter faded. Dozens of eyes turned. "You all looked like you were enjoying the trip down memory lane," I said. Thought I'd add one you might have forgotten. I held up my phone, the photo of Mom and me, her handwriting visible under the soft glow of the patio lights. "This was the last picture before she got sick," I said quietly. She wrote on the back, "Never let them rewrite you." The silence that followed was heavy, electric. "Seems I didn't get that memo in the slideshow," I added, smiling slightly. Carol looked like she wanted to sink into the floor. My father's face turned to stone. "Evan, that's enough," he said. "Oh, I agree," I replied. "It's been enough for a long time." The room stayed still. Then, a quiet voice from somewhere in the back, maybe Aunt Lynn, said softly, "That's her handwriting." And just like that, the illusion cracked. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Eyes darted between me, my father, and the giant projection behind him, now painfully incomplete. He opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. For the first time in my life, he had no words. And that silence was worth every year he tried to erase me. No one spoke for a long time. Not a cough, not a nervous laugh, just the weight of years pressing down on a room that had finally run out of lies. I looked at my father. He was still standing, still composed, but his eyes, those sharp, calculating eyes that used to pierce me with silent judgment, now looked uncertain, and that was new. He turned to Carol, his voice calm but strained. "Turn that off." The projector went black. The only light came from the patio lamps now, soft and golden, the kind of light that makes you see people as they really are tired, imperfect, human. Carol stepped forward, forcing a brittle smile. "All right, everyone, let's take a quick break. Coffee, dessert." But no one moved. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Then Aunt Lynn, the same one who'd recognized Mom's handwriting, spoke again, her tone quiet but firm. "You told us that picture was lost." My father blinked. "What?" "The photo," she said. "You told us you couldn't find any with her in them. That's why you didn't include her in the slideshow." He hesitated. For a man who always had a script, he suddenly didn't know his lines. "It was years ago. I must have forgotten." Lynn shook her head slowly. "You don't forget a wife." The silence deepened. I didn't need to say anything else. The truth was already doing my work for me. People started whispering, quiet and fast. Someone muttered, "So he cut her out." Another said, "He did the same with Evan." And just like that, 15 years of reputation started to crumble under the weight of one picture and one sentence. I stepped away from the mic, didn't gloat, didn't smirk. I just walked outside, into the cool night air, and let the sounds of unraveling echo behind me. The sky was cloudless, a rare, honest sky, the kind that doesn't hide anything. A moment later, I heard footsteps behind me. Carol, of course. "You had no right to do that," she hissed. "To tell the truth," I asked, turning toward her. "To embarrass him like that." He embarrassed himself. I said, I just held up a mirror. Her mask cracked. You don't understand what it's taken to hold this family together. You mean, to hold the lie together? He's tried, she said, her voice shaking. He's not perfect, but he's done his best. His best destroyed people quietly, I said. That's not best, that's cowardice in a suit. She flinched, then whispered, He loved your mother. No, I said softly. He loved owning her. Carol turned away, her composure crumbling like wet paper. For the first time, she didn't look like the villain in my story, just another victim of his orbit. She whispered before leaving. He thought forgetting her would make it easier to live. And how's that working out? She didn't answer. I stood there for a while, alone again, listening to laughter inside slowly twist into murmurs, not joyful ones, but curious, judgmental, unforgiving ones. Funny how quickly people shift. They worship you when you shine. They dissect you when you fall. And tonight, my father was finally being seen the way I'd always seen him, not as a monster, but as a man too proud to admit he was wrong. Michael came outside next, holding 2 beers. He handed me one wordlessly. We stood side by side, watching through the window as people began to leave, some offering polite goodbyes, some avoiding him entirely. You really lit a fire in there, he said with a grin. Wasn't my goal, I replied. Then what was? I thought for a moment. To stop pretending she didn't exist, that I didn't exist. Michael nodded. You did that. After a while, he left too. The night got quieter, heavier. I could hear my father's voice faintly inside, stern, low, defensive. Carol trying to reason, others whispering. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Then I remembered 16-year-old me standing in that driveway, watching strangers carry away my mother's life, and the sympathy evaporated. When he finally came outside, it was late. The backyard was empty now. He stood at the door for a long time before walking over. You made your point, he said flatly. Did I? He sighed. You humiliated me in front of everyone. No, I said. You did that when you erased her. When you erased me. Tonight was just the truth finally catching up. He looked away. You think I'm a bad man? I think you're a man who built a legacy out of silence, I said, and tonight, silence stopped obeying you. He laughed once short, bitter. You sound like her. That's the nicest thing you've ever said to me. She made you weak, he said. No, I replied. She made me kind. You just never learned the difference. He turned to leave, but then paused, shoulders tense. You want an apology? Fine. I'm sorry you felt unwanted. That's not an apology, I said. It's the best you'll get. No, I said, stepping closer, voice calm but cutting. The best I'll get is walking away knowing I don't need it. For the first time in his life, he didn't have control, and he hated it. I could see it in the way his jaw tightened, the way his eyes darted, the way his body tensed like he was bracing for a verdict he couldn't appeal. You think you're better than me now? He asked quietly. No, I said. I think I finally understand you. And that's worse. He blinked once, slowly then turned and went back inside. I let him, because the war was over, and I'd already won by refusing to fight it his way. When I left that night, I didn't slam the door. I didn't leave in rage. I just slipped away quietly, the same way I'd done years ago, but this time, it wasn't exile. It was release. The road home was dark, empty, and perfect. I rolled down the window, let the night air wash through, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel the weight of being forgotten. I felt free of needing to be remembered. The next morning, I woke up to dozens of messages, cousins, relatives, even Carol. Half of them said they were proud of me. The other half said I'd gone too far. But I didn't read most of them because I'd already said everything I needed to say. And more importantly, I'd finally stopped saying it to the wrong audience. The next few weeks played out like an echo that refused to die. Word of the incident spread fast. Family networks, professional circles, whispers disguised as concern. Everyone had a version of what happened that night, all of them different, all of them true in their own way. But one detail stayed consistent: the picture, the one he erased, the one I brought back. It became the symbol of everything he tried to bury and everything I refused to forget. I didn't plan for any of it. I didn't need to. Truth, when left alone long enough, grows teeth. A few days later, I got a call from Michael. He sounded hesitant, almost guilty. "Your dad's firm's in trouble," he said. Trouble. Clients are pulling out. Word got around about the reunion. Some board members are questioning his integrity after what happened. I said nothing for a moment, just listened to the sound of his voice struggling between loyalty and honesty. "He's always been good at pretending," I said. "Yeah," Michael sighed, "but you can't charm your way out of the truth." The next morning, my father called, not to apologize, of course not, but to negotiate. "We should talk," he said. "About what?" "About fixing this. Together." I almost laughed. "Together, you mean after decades of being invisible, I'm finally useful?" "You made a scene. Evan, people misunderstood. But if we present a united front..." "There's no we," I said. "You made sure of that." "Don't be naive," he snapped. "Reputation matters. So does truth." He paused. "Truth is perception." Then I guess perception finally caught up. And I hung up. He called again and again, each time, his tone softer, more desperate, like he could sense the empire cracking beneath his feet. But I didn't answer anymore, because revenge had already begun, not the kind that burns, but the kind that lets silence do the heavy lifting. Weeks later, I got a letter, real paper, his handwriting. "Evan, you've made your point. I understand you're angry, but this has gone far enough. I've given my life to this family, and you've thrown it away for what closure? Attention, I hope one day you'll realize that love sometimes looks like control, that discipline builds strength, that you'll thank me, eventually. Dad." I read it twice, then folded it neatly and placed it beside Mom's old photograph. "He still doesn't get it," I whispered. "Control isn't love, silence isn't peace, and fear isn't family." A month passed, then came the inevitable headline. "Prominent attorney steps down amid family controversy." It wasn't on the front page. It didn't need to be. For him, that was worse. His face, once the symbol of success, order, and power, now carried a shadow of irony. He became what he feared most, a man people whispered about. I didn't celebrate. There was no victory dance, no satisfaction in watching him fall. Just a strange, hollow calm, the kind that feels like peace wearing mourning clothes. Because the truth is, revenge doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like stillness after the storm, like standing in the wreckage and realizing you don't have to rebuild what hurt you. Carol called next. Her voice trembled. "He's not well," she said. "You should know." "Not well how?" "He's drinking, sleeping in his office. He doesn't talk much anymore." I exhaled slowly. "He used to love talking." "Evan, he misses you," she said softly. "No," I said. "He misses the control he had over me." "He's still your father." "And she was still his wife," I replied, but that didn't stop him from erasing her. Silence stretched across the line, two people bound by the same orbit, finally realizing it was disintegrating. "Before hanging up," she whispered, "you sound like her." And, for the first time, I smiled. That's the point. Time passed, and like all collapses, his wasn't cinematic. There was no explosion, no final confrontation, just slow decay, a reputation fading quietly into irrelevance. He sold the house, moved into a smaller one near the lake where he used to take us fishing when I was a kid, the same lake where he once told me, "Winners remember, losers forget." Now he was the one people were trying to forget. Sometimes I wondered if he ever thought of calling again, if he rehearsed an apology he'd never say, if he stood by that lake and finally saw himself not the man he built, but the father he failed to be. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. Either way, it didn't matter anymore. Because by then, I'd already moved on. My second book came out that year. It wasn't about him not directly, but about legacy, silence, and the inheritance of pain. It was called The Echo of Unspoken Things. Critics called it devastatingly honest. Readers called it healing. And I called it what it was, freedom. A few months later, I got a package. No return address. Inside, a small box wrapped in brown paper. When I opened it, I froze. It was Mom's locket, the one I thought he'd given away years ago. Inside was a faded photo, her on one side, me on the other, and a folded note. "She'd want you to have this." No name, no signature, but I didn't need one. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. It was something else, acknowledgement, the quiet kind that doesn't ask for a reply. That night, I took the locket to the lake near my apartment. The moonlight skimmed across the water, silver and weightless. I opened the locket, looked at her smile, and whispered, "I did it, Mom. I stayed true." The wind picked up soft, like a sigh, and in that sound, I swear I heard her say, "You never had to prove anything, sweetheart. You just had to remember who you were." When I got home, I placed the locket beside the photo of her handwriting. Two relics, two anchors, two proofs that truth always finds its way home. Then I sat down at my desk and wrote one more line for him, for her, for me. He erased me from the story, so I became the storyteller. And that was the real justice. Not the fall of a man, but the rise of a voice. Not revenge, but reclamation. Not punishment, but peace disguised as legacy. Because when the ones who silenced you finally fall quiet, that's not their ending. That's your beginning. Revenge doesn't echo forever. It fades gently, almost kindly, like a song you didn't realize had ended. And when it does, you're left with the quiet. The kind of quiet that feels both holy and heavy. It had been 6 months since the reunion. 6 months since the world I'd carried on my back finally set itself down. The calls stopped. The whispers faded. Even my father's name began to disappear from conversations, replaced by new gossip, new people, new noise. Oblivion moves fast when pride falls first. I moved to a smaller apartment near the city center. Nothing grand, just a space that breathed. Wood floors, big windows, quiet mornings, the kind of place you don't have to earn the right to exist in. My desk faced east, so I'd wake up to light every day, and somehow, that felt like a victory in itself. Writing became less about bleeding and more about breathing. I stopped trying to make sense of everything and just started describing what was. The smell of rain on old paper, the sound of keys at 3 a.m., the way sunlight looks on an empty mug. Small things, true things. That's what peace does. It shrinks the world back to what matters. Sometimes I'd still think of him, not out of anger anymore, but curiosity. What did he see when he looked back on his life now? Did he regret? Did he remember? Or did he still believe control could substitute for love? I'd never know. And for the first time, I didn't need to. Because closure, I learned, isn't an apology. It's a choice to stop waiting for one. One evening, while cleaning, I found something I hadn't noticed in months. The envelope his last letter came in. Still sealed. Still untouched. I'd only ever read the note inside, but this time, I noticed something else. The return address, it wasn't the firm, it was the lake house. The same place where he used to take me fishing, the same place where we stopped talking for good. I drove there that weekend, not for confrontation, not for answers, just for silence. The lake looked smaller than I remembered, or maybe I'd just grown bigger around it. The air smelled like pine and distance. The dock creaked the same way it used to when I was a boy, running barefoot beside him, pretending we were the same. We weren't, but standing there now, I could finally forgive that. I sat on the edge of the dock, feet dangling above the water, watching the reflection of clouds drift slowly past. And I realized something simple, something Mom probably knew all along. You can't fix what people refuse to admit is broken. You can only stop bleeding from it. I took out the locket, opened it. Her smile still shone, soft and unfazed by time. You'd laugh if you saw me now, I said softly. All that rage, all that pain, and it just dissolved. A breeze rippled across the water. It felt like an answer. That night, I stayed in the cabin, his cabin now empty, half packed, dust on the shelves, memories folded into boxes. I found one thing on the table, a photo frame turned face down. When I flipped it, I froze. It was the original unedited, untouched from that old slideshow. Me, Mom, Dad, before the fractures, before the silence, before the rewriting began. Her handwriting on the back again, same words. Never let them rewrite you. But this time, under it, another line newer, shakier. I tried to remember his handwriting. For the first time, I didn't feel triumph. I felt grief. Because this wasn't an apology. It was a confession. A man at the end of his story trying to trace the lines he'd erased too soon. I sat there a long time, the photo trembling slightly in my hands, the air thick with the kind of sadness that doesn't sting, it simply settles. When I left, I didn't take the photo. I placed it back on the table, face up this time, because some truths need to stay visible, even if no one's around to look at them. Driving home, the sunset painted the sky in gold and ash, the same color as endings that don't need closure. And I realized that revenge hadn't taken anything from me. It had only cleared space for peace to walk in. The cost was silence. The reward was stillness. Back home, I opened my window, let the evening air drift in, and whispered to the quiet. We did it, Mom. The story finally told itself. I smiled, because that was the moment I understood. You can't rewrite history, but you can write what comes after. 6 months passed like quiet pages turning themselves. The noise faded, the air cleared, and I learned to live again not out of defiance, but out of rhythm. Every morning, I brewed coffee in silence. Every night, I wrote for no one but myself, and somehow that smallness, that deliberate, ordinary calm felt revolutionary. The second book had taken on a life of its own. People started writing letters. Some were angry, some were grateful, most were lost. One woman wrote, Your story helped me forgive my father after 20 years. I didn't call him to reconcile. I just stopped letting his silence define me. Another said, I read your line, you can't rewrite history, but you can write what comes after, and I finally understood that I could start again. I kept every letter, boxed them carefully, labeled in black ink. Echoes. Because that's what they were, echoes of pain turning into understanding. Then one day, a local community center invited me to speak. They were hosting a program called The Art of Letting Go. I almost said no. Public speaking had never been my thing, but something inside whispered, maybe it's time. The day of the talk, the hall was modest 30 people, give or take. Some young, some old, all carrying invisible weights. I didn't prepare a speech. I just told the story. About the reunion, about the photo, about the silence that raised me, about the day I stopped asking to be remembered. And when I finished, I said quietly, we all want someone to see us, but sometimes the only eyes that matter are our own. Silence followed, not the uncomfortable kind, but the sacred kind. Then, slow applause, real, soft, human. Afterward, a man in his 40s came up to me, tears caught behind a nervous smile. My daughter doesn't speak to me, he said. I thought she was ungrateful, but now I think she just needed distance. He paused, swallowing hard. Thank you for helping me see her. I nodded, unable to speak for a moment, because that's when I realized what started as revenge had become redemption, not just mine, but others too. A few weeks later, I visited the lake again, not to mourn, but to reflect. The cabin was empty now, sold to someone else. The dock was rebuilt, the old boards replaced. But the water was the same, still, steady, always listening. I threw a pebble and watched the ripples fade. This is what healing looks like, I whispered, not forgetting, not forgiving too soon, just learning to live softer. When I came home, I started writing a third book, not about pain, not about revenge, about continuing. It began with one sentence. Once upon a silence, I learned how to speak again. This time, the words didn't hurt coming out. They felt like breathing. A month later, I got a call from Carol. Her voice was quiet or grounded. He's gone, she said. The room felt still. When? Last night. In his sleep. Peacefully. Silence. Then she added, he asked for your books before he went. He kept them by his bed. I didn't cry, not right away. But later, when I sat alone in my apartment, the weight of that sentence sank in. He'd never said sorry. He didn't have to. That was his apology, unread but understood. I drove to the lake one last time. The morning fog clung to the water like breath on glass. I stood there, holding the locket, the photo, and one of my books. We ended where we began, I said softly. Only this time, I'm not waiting to be seen. I placed the book on the dock and let the wind flip its pages. They rustled like conversation, gentle, forgiving. For a moment, I imagined him there, younger, unguarded, sitting beside me in silence. Maybe in some parallel world, we'd have talked. Maybe we'd have learned sooner. But in this one, we learned just in time. That night, back home, I wrote the final chapter. It wasn't about him. It wasn't about her. It wasn't even about me. It was about us, everyone who ever had to walk away to find themselves again. Sometimes, love doesn't sound like I'm sorry. It sounds like the world finally going quiet enough for you to hear your own voice again. I closed the laptop, sat back, and let that stillness fill the room. It didn't feel like revenge anymore. It felt like peace, pure, steady, deserved. The next morning, sunlight hit my desk just right, like a spotlight on a stage I hadn't realized I'd been standing on all along. And I smiled. Because the story was over, but the echo was only beginning. There's a kind of silence that feels alive, not empty, just full of everything that finally stopped hurting. That's where I live now, between sentences, between the noise of what was said and the peace of what no longer needs to be. I still visit the lake sometimes, not out of grief, out of gratitude, because it's the one place that remembers everything but never judges it. The ripples never ask why you came. They just make room. And maybe that's all any of us really want, a place that makes room for who we've become, not just who we were. Sometimes people ask me, "Do you forgive him?" And I always say the same thing. Forgiveness isn't a gift you give someone. It's the weight you finally put down. I didn't forgive him because he deserved it. I forgave him because I did. When I write now, I don't write to prove a point. I write to listen to the parts of me that used to be too afraid to speak. And if the world listens, good. If not, that's okay too. The point was never attention. The point was remembering myself. Sometimes I think about that reunion night, the photo, the faces, the moment when silence finally broke. I used to think that was the ending. Now I know it was just the beginning, the night I stopped trying to fit into their story and started writing my own. Every now and then, someone messages me saying, "Your story felt like mine." And I always smile, because that's the secret. It is theirs too. The details change, the names change, but the ache is the same, wanting to be seen, needing to be heard, learning to stop begging for both. Mom once told me something I didn't understand until now. People don't change when they're loved. They change when they're seen. And maybe that's why she wrote that line, "Never let them rewrite you," because being unseen is just another way of being edited. But not anymore. If you're still waiting for an invitation that never comes to the reunion, to the apology, to the love you should have had, this is it. This is your invitation. You don't need a seat at their table to have a story worth telling. Build your own table, light your own candles, and when the world doesn't clap, keep writing anyway. Because one day, someone else will find your words and whisper, "This saved me, the way someone once found mine." And when that happens, you'll realize what I did, that the real revenge was never about payback. It was about peace that no one could take from you again. The kind that sits quietly beside you, hands you a cup of coffee, and says, "You made it." If you've ever been left out, erased, or told that your feelings were too much, this story is for you. Don't wait for them to see you. See yourself. And when you finally do, don't look away. Because that moment, right there, that's where healing begins.